And if you cheated on that, good game, game over. You do not have to cheat. You can do this legitimately. Jared Henderson, everyone is cheating, even the professors.
A student from Northeastern University demanded her tuition back after she discovered that her professor was using ChatGPT to teach the class. It wasn't fair, she said, because this professor had banned students from using AI while he was using it himself. At another university, a student got some good news. She had gotten an A on a paper, so then she went to go and look at the comments that the professor had left on it, and she found that the professor had copy and pasted an exchange with ChatGPT. Not only was the professor using AI to grade the paper, but they were sloppy about it.
I have received so many emails from people where they copy the entire output, including, here is a warm, well-written email to blah, 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 and they include that line and then paste the rest of it as well. It baffles me.
More and more students are using AI for all of their work. And as one writer at New York Magazine put it, it seems like everyone is cheating their way through college. The way people tell this story, AI is ruining education. And on top of that, Gen Z is too lazy to do any work. But cheating at universities is nothing new. It's a long-running issue, and it has to do with the incentives of education in the United States. And it even involves the widespread issue of academic fraud from professors. Starting with this latest problem, AI. Every major artificial intelligence company now heavily markets themselves towards students, and it's definitely working. Nearly half of students and teachers at the K through 12 level say that they use AI, and nearly every college student uses AI in some capacity.
AI is the future, and if you're not learning how to use AI effectively, you're falling behind. That being said, AI does not necessarily mean that you are cheating. And there is an important distinction there that I want us to explore later in this video, because just like with any tool that has come before as well, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. The tool itself is not good or bad inherently. It's how we use the tool.
AI can write papers quickly, it can make it easy to pass a class, and it frees up a student's time so that they can do stuff that they'd rather be doing. There are now apps, websites, other services, all dedicated to helping students use AI to cheat and pass their classes. Professors who want to avoid cheating have to find workarounds. They'll sneak in extra words into assignments that are designed to mislead AI, or they'll demand that students take exams with blue books, like literally writing a test with, by hand with a pencil or a pen. This might solve part of the problem, but when it comes to things like take-home assignments or extended essays or even short reading responses, well, the overwhelming odds are that students are using AI to do basically all of that work.
And there's the interesting thing, because what I specialize is medical admissions, right? So I'm looking through the lens of people who are in college as pre-meds who want to become doctors, and they're going to be doing a lot of science courses, your biology, your general chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and so on. And those first 2 years of your college coursework are primarily going to be, not entirely, but mostly going to be your medical school prerequisites. And guess what? Big test is going to examine whether or not you actually understand that material, the MCAT. You're not using any AI on the MCAT. They have all these security measures. You're going into a standardized prometric center, taking the test. And what people don't understand, and I saw this a lot even when I was in college, so many people back then, before AI came out, like they're willing to do the shortcut for an easy win now, even though they know they're not going to learn the material as well, and then the next step will be harder. So if you are cheating on assignments for your Gen Chem, OChem, etc., and you're using AI in the wrong way, rather than it tutoring you, it's just giving you the answer, and you're not sure how to actually get to the correct answer on your own, then when you eventually get to the MCAT or the next exam, then how are you going to survive? And in terms of the testing methodology, he's talking about blue books. Regardless of the course, professors generally are not giving you these take-home finals and take-home midterms where you can just cheat or open book or whatever. So you're shooting yourself in the foot if you do the shortcut of the take-home assignment, because you're not going to understand it for the midterm or the final.
The consequences of this are pretty dire. One professor at Cal State Chico said that massive numbers of students are going to graduate from university and they're going to enter the work and they will be essentially illiterate. I think the concern is that whatever skills we think you're supposed to develop when you go to college, when you go to university, aren't being developed at all. That's because more students are finding out they don't need to read or write or have any original thoughts in order to get their degrees.
And I think that's also going to depend on what the major is. So I see this being a bigger problem for things like the humanities, right? It's going to be less so in the case of mathematics and sciences, I would imagine, based on the way that the tests are done. Because even if you use AI to cheat on all of your science or math take-home assignments and homework, then when you get to the midterms and the finals, how are you actually going to pass, right?
Some universities like Ohio State have decided that the solution is to just embrace AI completely Ohio State actually says that every student will be encouraged to use AI in every class from now on, but most universities simply don't know what to do.
I think that having students use AI is not a bad idea. Again, it's how you use it.
Much of modern education is really not about passing on skills or learning things. It's simply about getting the degree at the end of the day. And that's because a degree signals certain facts about you. And Kaplan says that those include intelligence, conscientiousness, and conformity. Many employers will require a college degree for a high-paying job, but they're not necessarily looking for specific skills that you acquired in the course of getting that degree. An art history major might end up working on Wall Street. After I got a PhD in philosophy, I went into tech, and it's not like my PhD in philosophy was directly setting me up to go work in tech. Many people get degrees in things like communications or psychology, and they get jobs that do not require you to know anything about theories of communication or facts about the human mind. By the way, my new puppy, Apollo, is joining us for this video because he really likes to be held.
Adorable.
If the skills you acquire in the course of getting a college degree don't actually matter, then why do employers require one? It's because a college degree does usually signal some facts about the job seeker. It just has very little to do with the content of your education. It basically says that you were able to survive for 4 years at an institution that has kind of arcane and arbitrary rules, and that you were good enough at following those rules and smart enough to navigate them that you could get a degree at the end. And guess what? Working at a large corporation is going to be an experience of surviving an arcane and obscure institution with weird rules.
It is an interesting theory, this signaling theory, right? That by going to college, it is an honest signal that you have certain desirable qualities for an employer. Now, as we apply this to the medical education process, after you go to college, you go to medical school, right? And obviously, art history major going on finance, they're not really using the information they've learned. The pre-med who goes to med school and then residency, they are using the information they have learned in a very direct, applicable way. And I would argue that when it comes to these graduate and professional schools, it is a much more honest indicator than just going to undergrad, as he's pointing out here from Kaplan's book. Because to get into an MD program, you had to pass a very high bar, right? To get into a DO program, you still had to pass a bar, maybe not quite as high. And then to get into Caribbean school to go MD or, a lot of other international schools, didn't have to pass quite the same bar. That's more about like paying tuition. And that's also why when it comes to getting into a US residency, it's a lot harder to do so as an IMG. It's easiest for MDs, a little bit harder for DOs, and a lot harder for the FMGs and the IMGs, meaning the foreign and the international medical graduates. So I understand he's talking about just regular undergrad, these non-science degrees going into various professions. I'm talking about medical training, and it's not just signaling, right? It is very much directly applicable what you learn during your education and how you're taking care of patients.
Kaplan's theory doesn't really account for specialist degrees like engineering, but we can set those aside because those are a minority of degrees.
Okay, yeah. So engineering, and then also I'd say medicine and a few other categories as well.
I think deep down, actually, many students realize that this is true. They look at many of the classes they have to take in college and they think, why does any of this matter? All I'm looking to do is to just get a better job at the end of this. If you're going to college to increase your career prospects or to climb the social ladder, well, philosophy 101 isn't necessarily going to help you do that. And if you're a student who understands this, then using AI to cheat isn't just reasonable, it might be the rational thing to do.
I see the point that he's making, but it is, I don't know, call me old-fashioned, call me overly principled, but it just seems so short-sighted to take the easy way out and not embrace the friction intentionally to actually grow as a person, right? So I have another channel you can see with this helmet behind me. I like cars and I drive manual transmission, and I think there's an art to it. And even though there are certain cars that have an auto rev match, I want to rev match my own downshifts with my own heel toe and double clutch and things like that. Why is that? Because it is an art, it is a skill that I want to have that I can take with me regardless of where I go. I now have that skill. I can sell a car, I can buy a new car, I can drive a friend's car, whatever. I now have that skill. And the same thing here, when you just look at the immediate short-term outcome, you say, well, I need to just do X, Y, and Z to get an A in a class. And you're not thinking, well, what are the skills that I'm actually learning by struggling to do this the right way? Even when I was in college, it wasn't AI at the time, but it was a lot of stimulants, right, that were being abused by various students. And I always found it so puzzling. Like, you guys are doing this as a shortcut right now. You know that medical school is going to be harder. And then residency is going to be challenging too. Like, you're now telling yourself you cannot meet the bar. The bar to getting into med school is it is a bar, but like things get more challenging from there. So you are subconsciously telling yourself that you don't have what it takes and you're going to use a crutch. And somehow you're going to convince yourself that you don't need the crutch later on when it gets more challenging. Obviously not. You're now going to be on the crutch for so long. And there are a lot of negative health consequences from doing so.
You're not there to wax philosophical about Kantianism versus utilitarianism or to go and write an essay about Charles Dickens. I wish more people wanted to do those things, but it's not why most people go to school. Kaplan really is just thinking about the incentives of getting a college degree. And I think if there's like a big thesis for this video, it's that incentives matter.
Charlie Munger, you show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes. And incentives have changed over the last several decades because the number of people getting college degrees 50 years ago was way smaller than it is now. Now it is much more the norm. And if you don't get a college degree, it's almost like, well, why not? What's wrong with you kind of thing. Even though there are many arguments to be made as to why you should not necessarily get a college degree if you're not pursuing something that requires graduate and professional training after college.
To make Kaplan's point a little bit clearer, you could look at the phenomenon of diploma mills. These are institutions that set themselves up like colleges and universities. They are often for-profit and unaccredited, and in exchange for some money and very little work, you can get a college degree. It's even a way to get a PhD in some cases. Some schools will simply give you the degree if you pay them enough money. That's the most egregious example, but other schools will simply just make it very easy for you to get the degree. They'll count work experience as credit, for instance.
There is some of this, unfortunately, even in healthcare training. You can see my video over on the Med School Insider channel about the high variance when it comes to NPs getting trained. But in medical training, in medical school, it's a lot harder. I mean, there are many for-profit institutions in the Caribbean as an example, and the accrediting body there is far looser, and there are schools, there's a spectrum of programs there. And again, some great doctors come out of Caribbean programs, but at the same time, there are these predatory institutions that have very, very low success rates for their students, very high attrition. A lot of students drop out or don't finish their training. And the thing is, when it comes to being a doctor in the US, you need to pass USMLE Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. These are standardized exams, very rigorous, that even if you try to take the easy route, which, surprise, surprise, is not actually easy because easy now, hard later, then you end up in a very precarious situation that we've covered elsewhere in our MD, DO, Caribbean videos over on the Med School Insider channel.
And if all you need on your resume is just a degree from some school so that some AI filter at some company will let you through so that a human being will actually just read your resume, well, then it kind of makes sense to go and get a degree, even though these things are, scam. Not having a degree is a problem if you're looking for a job. A fake degree solves that problem, and you don't have to learn anything. Perhaps the tragedy of what is happening at many universities where students could just use AI to cheat on everything is that kind of all education is eventually just going to be fake and made up because nobody actually has to learn anything to get a degree.
I mean, that's a logical extreme. I definitely don't agree with that, although that can be directionally true for certain parts of education.
When I read Kaplan's book, I immediately saw a connection to another issue in academia, the widespread presence of academic fraud. This is research fraud that's committed by professors. Recently, there was the case of a Harvard Business School professor, Francesca Gino. Her tenure was revoked, which almost never happens, and she was fired from Harvard after an investigation found significant evidence of fraud in her research. It seems she had used fake data in multiple studies, and some of the papers where she faked this data was research on authenticity and honesty.
Wow, the irony, dude. Dude, the whole people are so bold to think that they can do these things and never get caught. It's wild to me. I mean, I hope that everyone recalls the whole vaccine autism scandal from Andrew Wakefield and the MMR vaccine and autism in the Lancet, right? I think that was published in 99. A little more than a decade later, it's retracted by the Lancet. His medical license is revoked, and the damage has been done, right? There's all this misinformation about vaccines and autism now as a result from fabricated, fraudulent data. And then there are also papers, of course, during COVID about hydroxychloroquine that ended up in New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, again, fraudulent stuff there, influenced WHO policies, and it was all a scam. This is actually a huge problem because this can directly shape patient care. I mean, just from those two examples, right? You can imagine the thousands, millions of lives that have been influenced from misinformation about vaccines, or during the pandemic, various policies, hydroxychloroquine, etc. These are things that we need to have zero tolerance for and have significant repercussions. I mean, this is criminal stuff, I'd argue.
It's very rare for tenured academics to ever be fired. If you can get tenure, it is basically a guarantee of a job for life. And that should show you just how serious these infractions were. The investigation into Gino's work started several years ago, and it actually began with some science bloggers. That's where a lot of academic fraud seems to be discovered. These bloggers found significant issues in at least 4 of Gino's published papers. Gino tried to say that she was a victim of defamation and gender discrimination, and that her privacy had been invaded. Then she sued Harvard, she sued the dean of the Harvard Business School, her boss, and she sued those bloggers, but that case was thrown out by a judge. And now Harvard Business School has determined that she really did fake data, and now she's lost her job.
Dude, like, it should be more than just losing a job, though, especially like, and then fighting back and claiming these things and trying to sue. And here's the real. I feel like nowadays, because the bar is so low, because everyone has such loose morals and they're so easy to sway and they want the easy way out and they want to just, dopamine addicted. Let me scroll on TikTok. I can't endure any, discipline and focus, and I can't go work through hard things, and I can't resist eating the proper way. Like, it is so easy now versus any other time in history to be a top performer. Like, to be the top 5 or 10%, it is shockingly easy. That should be your very attainable goal. So the silver lining here is that while technology is making people more complacent and lazy and just weaker versions of themselves, if you're able to just practice a modicum of discipline and just like have the slightest bit of integrity and smallest amount of conscientiousness, you're now in the top 10%. Congratulations.
Throughout 2024, there were many high-profile academics who were found guilty of plagiarism, or as they sometimes put it, inadequate citation, including a former professor of Harvard. And just recently, a PhD student at MIT in the economics program had a paper pulled, and I believe is no longer a student at MIT, after the university investigated it, and they went on to say they had no confidence in the veracity of the research. Because of privacy laws and university policies, MIT really can't say much beyond that. They don't even use the student's name in that announcement. This might seem fairly minor because students cheat on papers all the time. However, this paper was scheduled to be published in a good economics journal, and it had already been posted as a preprint on the website Archive. That's a website where scientists post copies of their research so that it's more freely accessible. In this case, the problem was that the research was fraudulent. If the paper had been legitimate, it would have made this student's career because it had a really provocative conclusion. It seemed to show that using AI actually boosted a firm's research productivity. So
here's the thing, guys. I mean, research is challenging. I get it. I was the pre-med that it took me 3.5 years. I worked my tail off in a lab about ulcerative colitis. So I have ulcerative colitis. I had just gotten diagnosed at the beginning of freshman year. I was very motivated then to become a doctor, and I found a lab researching my own disease. So of course I was very motivated, worked quite hard in that lab. After 3.5 years, I got 1 third author paper and 1 fourth author abstract. Not good, right? I get it. Research is hard. There's friction. There's a very steep learning curve. And everyone says, to approach research, here's what you got to do. You join a lab and do X, Y, and Z. And it is very challenging. And I understand the incentives to try to cheat on these things. But guess what? When you go to he's talking about a job market here, or when you're going to your medical school or residency interviews, you will be grilled on your research. And if you cheated on that, or if there is any academic dishonesty that is found out about your research, good game over. And there are ways to optimize and to extract more value from research. So I got those 2 research items, which were not good. Third author, fourth author, nothing to brag about. In med school, in the very beginning of med school, I did another paper on pediatric gastroenterology informed consent because I wanted to be a pediatric gastroenterologist, and I think it was a first author. So yay, my first author publication. But then towards the end of med school, in my second half of my 3rd year, I was like, oh my God, I want to do plastic surgery. I have a big problem. I don't have anywhere near enough research. So in essentially a year, I did another something like 60 research items, which is bonkers. And you don't have to do that. But this is before AI, right? I have 29 publications total. So I think it was 27 that were worked on in a given year. The publication timelines can be more than a year long because you can have revisions and back and forth, etc. But essentially in a year, 27 publications, 34-ish abstracts and presentations. It was a lot of volume. You don't have to do that. But I'm showing you that this is possible without using AI, without cheating. There are more and less optimal ways to approach research in a way that can actually move the needle for you on your medical school, on your residency applications. You don't have to resort to cheating with AI or fabricating data. Research is a game. Research is actually the most widely misunderstood extracurricular for both pre-meds and med students. Even by doctors, like there are many doctors who will tell students, oh yeah, I did some research and here's how you do it. It's like not optimal. You're gonna end up being that student like me, 3.5 years, third author, fourth author, paper and abstract, not ideal. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. I do very much care about research. It's something I put a lot of time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears in. And I now teach students how to approach research in a much better way. And you can learn more about that in the description if you are interested.
People were naturally interested in this paper, and it was getting a lot of buzz from the moment it was posted on arXiv. And sometimes this academic fraud has real world consequences. One of the most famous academic frauds is Brian Wansink. Wansink was a nutrition scientist at Cornell, and he's actually responsible for some studies that entered the public consciousness. You might believe some of the things that was initially discovered, that's discovered in quotes, by Wansink and his team. Have you ever heard that shopping on an empty stomach is a bad idea because you'll buy more food, or maybe you'll buy more junk food? That was originally from a Wansink study, and I believe that study has been discredited along with much of his other research. He was also responsible for that idea that the size of your plate determined how much you wanted to eat at a meal. In 2017, it was discovered that Wansink had in some cases fabricated data, and in other cases he had done misleading analyses of the data to try and support his claim. The simplest way to describe that, though, is that he committed fraud. He was actually found out because he wrote a blog post about his own methodology, and he admitted that sometimes he would have graduate students go over experiments that seemed to be initial failures and go looking for interesting results in the data. And this is a classic sort of research misconduct.
Okay, hold on. Distinction not being made here, that is a very important distinction. Fabricating data, big no-no, fraud. What he's referring to of failed experiment from the initial hypothesis, now going back to the data to see what else is interesting, that's not fraud. That's called p-hacking or harking, which is hypothesis after results are known. This is a way to, it's definitely not fraud, but it is not optimal science by any means.
When Cornell reviewed his research, they found many problems, including misreporting research data, problematic statistical techniques, failure to properly document and preserve research results, and inappropriate authorship. When we're talking about student misconduct at universities, like using AI to cheat in all their classes, I think it's also important to look at professors and ask questions about why do so many professors commit research fraud? Or you could ask the more general question, just why do they lie? We like to think of scientists as noble individuals in pursuit of truth. How are they tempted to abandon this pursuit of truth and then go and commit fraud? One of the best writers on this subject is Liam Coffey-Bright. He's a philosopher at the London School of Economics, and he studies the social epistemology of science. In other words, he studies how the institutions and group dynamics of science affect scientific progress. And in a paper, Why Do Scientists Lie?, Bright points out that if you have a PhD in physics or some other science, you could actually go and get rich by leaving academia and entering industry. If you're looking to get rich as a scientist, you're better off just leaving academia. And that would suggest that most professors don't commit fraud because they're greedy. If they were really greedy and just wanted more money, they would just quit their university jobs. Bright instead defends an idea that's originally due to Robert Merton. Merton theorized in the 1960s that scientists are what we could call credit seekers. Another term that Bright and Merton use is honor. They seek status in the scientific community, the way we have arranged our institutions, and you achieve status by producing research, and we typically want novelty, so we want the results to be new, and volume of output.
This reminds me of something I was hearing about how people tend to value power, fame, money, or love, I think it was. So maybe this is like fame in just that research community, right? Here's what's coming up for me. I think that as humans, we all do this. We want to put our best foot forward. And we simply have different lines as to what we are willing or not willing to cross. Let's say someone had a very bad odor or violent flatulence, like we wouldn't hold it against them and call them fraudulent for choosing to mostly do online meetings and not in-person meetings, or to like edit out parts of, like silent, like mute their microphone and things like that so you don't hear whatever's going on there. So that's an example where no one's going to have any problem with that. But on the other end, fabricating data, we all say, okay, that's a clear hard line that you should not cross. But in the middle is where you have to make a personal decision. So Peter Attia, as an example, and yes, very disappointing connections and communications with Jeffrey Epstein, which is not the point I'm trying to make here. Even before all of that, he would go around, even in his book and the way he communicated online and on TED Talks, etc., giving the impression that he was a surgical oncologist that is no longer practicing, which is not true. He never even got to surgical oncology residency. He did his 3 years of general surgery residency, then did 2 years of a research fellowship in surgical oncology at the NIH, was never a surgical oncologist, but everyone online is like, oh, he's a surgical oncologist. Well, no, you do 5 years of a general surgery residency first, then you do 2 years of a surgical oncology fellowship, and then you are a surgical oncologist. So that's an area where he found it justified to give the impression that he was a surgical oncologist. I could have gone and said, hey, I'm a former plastic surgeon, but I'm not. I was a plastic surgery resident, right? In the same way that he was a general surgery resident that left, I was a plastic surgery resident that left. And that doesn't make me a fully trained plastic surgeon. And it would be misleading if I told people that I was a fully trained plastic surgeon. But that being said, we all do this to some degree. I don't think anyone, myself included, is pure good, pure bad. I think that we're all somewhere in the spectrum where we all do certain things to put our best foot forward. And we choose to show or not show certain parts of ourselves. And I think you have to be very cautious to never let yourself get tempted on this far end where you're like doing fraudulent data and all that nonsense. But then it would also be naive and foolish to not put your best foot forward and overshare everything, make people uncomfortable, show your negative qualities on blast, right? So it's like everyone's somewhere in the middle. You have to decide for yourself, where on that spectrum are you willing to stand? And just make sure you never go too far on that fraudulent side.
I don't have many secrets.
Most academic researchers go through something called a tenure review at some point in their career. This is where academics evaluate your work and they decide whether or not you should be granted tenure. And if you get tenure at a school, you are basically guaranteed a job for life. You're not going to become fabulously wealthy this way, but it essentially guarantees an upper middle class existence. And if you fail your tenure review, typically you're fired. And to pass your tenure review, you prove that you're a good researcher. And two of the major metrics that we use to judge this are the number of articles or books that you've published and how often you're cited by other people. So essentially, we're asking, do you produce a lot of research? And is that research interesting enough that people keep talking about it when they do research?
Yeah, so that refers to your H index, right? How frequently you are cited. And that's a way to, it's not a foolproof method, but it is a way to control against having a high volume of low quality research. It's one of these honest indicators.
Turns out that both of these metrics can be gamed. There are journals that you can pay to publish your academic papers. It's fairly easy to get caught doing this, but some academics still do it.
Don't do that. These are predatory journals. People know which, especially the more specialized you get, it is very clear which journals are legit, which ones are not. Don't do that. You do not want to be part of a predatory journal. Do not pay to play.
Another way, though, is to commit fraud. And most academics who commit research fraud probably don't think they're doing anything that bad. And they're not going to do things that are as egregious as some of the people that we've talked about today, like where they just fake data, they make things up. So instead, they're fudging statistics. They slightly misdescribe the evidence. They might even believe that they're doing nothing wrong. When you're properly incentivized, you can deceive yourself. If you want to then get cited more, well, you can pay for that too. You can still get caught. So again, if you want to avoid scandal and boost your citations, you just need to publish new and interesting ideas. Take a look at how Bright puts it. Scientists want and need credit for new results. To ensure their results are new, i.e. novel enough to have a plausible claim to establishing priority, scientists have to do their work sufficiently quickly that nobody else beats them to the punch. So because these scientists have to work fast, they are incentivized to either be sloppy or to commit fraud. See, that's the incentive. Researchers commit fraud because they are rewarded for publishing often and for publishing big results and for appearing to be geniuses. So they fudge the numbers, they sometimes outright lie, and they fabricate data. Other times you plagiarize where you just steal research from other people. In other words, you find a way to cheat. I think...
Wow, I will admit that the whole idea of paying for citations, that is news to me, but it makes sense, right? Because in medical training, your citation count is not really as emphasized. So that's not really a problem that I've seen amongst pre-meds and med students. It's much more the case in academia with professors. But again, I want to tell you that you don't have to do that. You don't have to result in these shortcuts and cheating and like paying for research. Like you should never have to resort to these predatory journals or these questionable tactics. Going back to when I was in med school, when I was really trying to optimize my research, You don't want to have a high volume of junk, right? You want stuff that is interesting, that is cited. So I will tell you from firsthand experience, you do not have to cheat. You can do this legitimately. I have an H index of 16, according to researchgate.net, and Doximity, which is like LinkedIn for doctors, I guess. I'm one of the top 5 most cited doctors on their platform, which is nuts because I haven't done any new research in a decade. It's been 10 years since I've done new research, and I'm still one of the top 5% most cited physicians in research on their platform, right? This is using legitimate research. And again, that may sound crazy, but I was that student that took 3.5 years to do a 3rd author and a 4th author because I just did what everyone says you're supposed to do. But then I went and innovated some things, thought from first principles, created a new way to do research in a much better method. And now I teach that to students. Again, you can find that linked below, but you don't have to do the shortcuts, guys. Like when you apply yourself and you think of a better way, you can get outsized returns because most people are not willing to put in the time, the effort, and actually innovate on these things because it's hard. It's not easy. But those who are willing to do that can truly stand out. Take my research story as an example.
Essentially, what they're trying to do is game the system. They want the economic or lifestyle benefits of an education, but they don't want to have to put in the work. Human beings are often lazy. They look for shortcuts. It's a normal way to behave. It might not be an admirable way to behave, but it's at least normal. And the academics who commit fraud are doing roughly the same thing. They want the benefits of having done this great research, but they look for shortcuts. You look at both of those cases, there's one common lesson, simply that incentives matter. How you structure an institution matters, and how an institution is structured and what it rewards matters. There aren't going to be quick fixes to either problem. Part of the problem is you have to convince people that being truthful or doing your homework or really thoroughly going over all your data matters. And essentially what you're doing is convincing people to spend more of their time doing things that probably they don't really want to do.
Well, yes, incentives matter. Again, Charlie Munger, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes. That's why even at our company, Med School Insiders, we spent so much time from the beginning when we first started in 2016, focusing on the incentives for all of our team members and all of our doctors to make sure that the student that works with us gets the best experience. Because yes, incentives matter. I very much like that Charlie Munger quote guides a lot of my decisions in terms of when I'm building structures to hopefully make a certain outcome more likely or higher quality. So if incentives matter, there's a few things to keep in mind. Number one, competitive things will always be competitive. People will try to game a system because if only 40% of students get into med school, and when I say that statistic, some people say, oh, that's like not that bad. Look, 60% don't get in. That's out of those who applied. When I started at UCLA, there were 2,500 pre-meds. By the time I applied in my senior year, I guess technically at the end of my junior year, but there were only 200 that had applied. And I'm sure that another 300 would apply after that. But let's say 500 out of 2,500 even applied. And out of those 500, only 40% got in. So competitive things will remain competitive. And getting into medical school, getting into residency will remain competitive. The question is, what are the things that we are using to measure that? Now, of course, MCAT, GPA for those who are getting into med school, Step 2 CK score, and research for those getting into residency. These are things that students are trying to optimize for. And one of these standardized tests in med school, Step 1. So there's Step 1 and Step 2 in med school. This is a conversation from a few years ago, pre-pandemic, where people were talking about Step 1 is so heavily indexed and weighted, and it shouldn't be, and it's stressing out students, so we need to make it pass-fail. And before the change was made in 2022, I made multiple videos saying, hey guys, that's not how things work. In a complex system, such as residency applications, that's multifactorial, has a lot of variables. If you change one variable, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to see how changing that one variable is going to influence all the other variables. Similarly, a lot of people who are advocating and excited about Step 1 being pass-fail point to their own experience or their upcoming experience with the stress of Step 1 and the anxiety and the burnout and all those negative emotions. But here's the thing, that's not because of Step 1. It's a symptom of a broken system, not due to Step 1 inherently. I get it, Step 1 is super stressful. I've been there. But here's the thing, making Step 1 pass-fail doesn't make plastic surgery or dermatology any less competitive. Instead, you're gonna have other factors, other variables, other parts of your application, whether objective or subjective, being weighed more heavily, and there's pros and cons that do come with that. The incentive here is to be as competitive as possible, and Step 1 being pass-fail doesn't change the incentive, it just shifts it elsewhere. So when Step 1 became pass-fail, guess what happened to the number of research items across every specialty, which by the way, you can see all the data before and after Step 1 went pass-fail at specialtyrank.com. And you'll see before Step 1 went pass-fail, slow, steady increase in research count year to year because things are competitive. People want to stand out. So slowly increasing, 1, 2, 3 items per year. And then all of a sudden after step 1 went pass fail, boom. Neurosurgery alone went up by like a dozen research items between 2 data points. That's nuts. Whereas before it was only a couple. So the pressure shifted from step 1 to then going to research and step 2. Because step 1 being pass fail, now you cannot stand out by your step 1 score because now you just get a pass. So you have to understand how incentives work. And you can't just play whack-a-mole and try to take the thing that is challenging and try to ban it or change it and that's going to fix the problem. No, competitive things are competitive. And you have to figure out what is the structure of that competition that you're going to incentivize and disincentivize. So as an example here, what Jared's talking about, I think there should be stronger disincentives for fraudulent data. I think the punishment needs to be more severe. I think we need to spend more effort trying to find those studies, those research articles that are fabricated. Why did it take us more than a decade to find this, MMR Lancet fraudulent data? That's like the amount of damage that has been done from the autism vaccine misconnection, misinformation is absolutely wild.
And this is, I think, the big challenge that universities around the country are going to be facing. I've talked many times in this channel about the ways that universities have sort of lost their way. They are beholden to a certain economic model of education, which can make it difficult to see why actually getting an education in the first place matters. And we're seeing more attacks on higher education from various parts of the government.
Yeah, the whole college education price skyrocketing is a huge scam, a massive scam. And because students can take out all these loans and the federal government was going to just give you these subsidized loans, like it was this cycle that just completely ballooned the cost of tuition and cost of attendance. That it is wild how our policies have now allowed for such a ridiculous system. For those who are not going into medicine, right? For those who are just getting their art history major or whatever else that is not quite as directly related to an actual profession after they graduate. By the way, you should probably choose things that are going to be more applicable when you graduate, because having a $200,000 art history major diploma, I'm not sure how useful that's going to be. But higher education does have many problems, and I think that the skyrocketing cost of tuition is one of them.
A day or two before recording this, I saw the news that Indiana University, which is a premier state university that's known for its language programs, just cut many of those programs due to low enrollment. There's a new state law that says that if you don't have a certain number of graduates per year, the major and the PhD program and everything just go away. And so now they've just gutted some of the best language departments in the country. When it comes to education in the United States, I think we're at an inflection point. Universities have to figure out what they want to offer to the world, what they want to offer to students, and what they want to be going into the future.
What this also reminds me of is how there was this effort to ban SAT because it's supposedly racist and discriminatory. This is like back before the pandemic. And the UC system was not considering SAT scores in enrollment decisions. And these programs who initially said, okay, we're not going to use SAT, are now returning back to using it. Because here's the thing. These standardized tests, you cannot cheat on. You cannot use AI to boost your score. But guess what you can do? You can use AI to write your personal statement and help you finesse your experiences and use whatever services to help their student polish their whole application beyond their test scores to get into these competitive programs, right? For those who have been watching the channel, you know that I find many issues with our current higher education system. But kudos to Jared. That was a very thoughtful video. And admittedly, my area of expertise is not in the humanities and these other areas in college education. I'm focused on high school, college, and medical students, people who are trying to become doctors, and the majors they choose and the experiences that they have and the selection process from high school to college to medical school and to residency and that whole process. So let me know what you guys think with a comment down below. Much love, and I'll see you in that next one.